There's a particular kind of tragedy that belongs only to the great. Not the tragedy of obscurity, not the tragedy of failure through weakness, but the tragedy of a man who rises higher than any before him, who reshapes the world with his bare hands, and who is then undone not by an enemy worthy of his power, but by a city of philosophers and sailors that by all rights should have been a footnote in his story. That is the story of Darius I of Persia, a man history calls the Great, though even that epithet, as we shall see, comes with a caveat. And that caveat is Athens. He was born around 550 BCE, in Old Persian bearing the full name Dryavo, a name that filtered through Greek and then Latin would reach us as Darius. He was the son of Hystaspes, a Persian noble and military officer who had served under Cyrus the Great, the legendary founder of the Achaemenid Empire. From the earliest years of his life, Darius inhabited the highest circles of Persian power, not quite at the throne, but close enough to feel its heat. He came to power at age 28, but the road from well-born courtier to king of kings was anything but straight. It was, in fact, a road paved with blood, suspicion, intrigue, and a horse. According to the Greek historian Herodotus, Darius, when a youth, was suspected by Cyrus II the Great of plotting against the throne. Whether this was true or not, it tells us something important. From the beginning, Darius was someone who drew attention, someone who made powerful men nervous. He survived those suspicions and went on to serve in the royal court, eventually becoming, as Herodotus records, a spearman or Dorophoros in the Egyptian campaigns of Cambyses II, son and heir of Cyrus. This is often interpreted to mean he was the king's personal spear carrier, an important role. And then, in the summer of 522 BCE, the Persian Empire tore itself apart. The Persian Empire had been founded less than 30 years before by Cyrus the Great. Cyrus had defeated the Medes, conquered Lydia in western Turkey, taking down the fabulously rich King Croesus in the process, and in 539 BCE had brought Babylon itself to its knees. His son Cambyses continued this breathless expansion, adding Egypt to the empire in 525 BCE. But Cambyses lingered too long in the Nile Valley, dreaming of Ethiopia and Carthage, and in his absence, the empire began to shake. According to Greek sources, when Cambyses heard that his brother Smerdis had revolted back in Persia, he rushed to return. But his sword's sheath lost its cap, the blade pierced his thigh, and Cambyses died in Syria, without children, leaving the army without a commander and the empire to Smerdis, or someone who resembled him. That last phrase is crucial, because what happened next reads less like history and more like a political thriller. According to Herodotus, Cambyses had secretly had his brother Smerdis, known in Persian as Bardia, executed before departing for Egypt. While Cambyses was away, a Magian priest named Gaumata, trusting in a physical resemblance to the murdered prince, put himself forward as Smerdis and seized the throne. For months, this impersonator ruled the empire. He remained almost entirely within the palace and would not receive visitors, allowing all his business to be handled by a trusted minister, because he feared that anyone who had known the real Bardia would expose him. But the truth, as it always does, began to leak. A daughter of one of the nobles discovered that the ruler was not Cambyses' brother. Her father, Otanes, after learning the truth, quickly assembled a group of conspirators, Hydarnes, Intaphrines, Megabyzus, and Darius, who at the time was still the king's lancer. 7 nobles in total, bound by a shared secret and a shared ambition. They agreed to act. On the 10th day of the month of Bogdiades, the 29th of September, 522 BC, Darius, with a few men, slew Gaumata, the Magian, and the chief men who were his followers, at a stronghold in the district of Nicaea in Media. That is what Darius himself would later carve into a cliff face, in 3 languages for all time. The conspirators then faced a question that would echo through the centuries. Who rules now? Otanes proposed oligarchy. Megabyzus suggested a council, while Darius voted for monarchy. Unable to settle the matter in debate, they devised a contest. They would each mount their horses the following morning at sunrise, and the man whose horse neighed first would be named king. Darius, by means that Herodotus records with a certain knowing wink, ensured that his horse whinnied at just the right moment. Darius won the throne of Persia and, to seal his position, married Atassa, the daughter of Cyrus the Great. He had the lineage of a soldier, the cunning of a politician, and now, through marriage, a direct connection to the dynasty that the whole empire still worshipped. But the throne was not as yet, not in any real sense. He soon learned that support for Bardia had been strong, and revolts had broken out in Elam and Babylonia. Many subjects in distant lands saw the succession crisis as an opportunity to rebel. As a result, Darius spent his first 3 years quelling uprisings. The scale of what he faced was almost incomprehensible. By 522 BCE, there were revolts against Darius in most parts of the Achaemenid Empire, leaving the empire in turmoil. Elam rose. Babylonia rose. Then Persis itself, the Persian homeland. Then Media, Parthia, Assyria. Darius fought, by his own count, 19 battles in a single year, defeating 9 kings. He recorded every one of those victories on a cliff face near the ancient road between Babylon and Ecbatana, the famous Behistun inscription. Carved 330 feet up a sheer limestone cliff in what is now the Kermanshah province of western Iran, the Behistun relief shows Darius holding a bow as a sign of kingship, his left foot on the chest of the fallen impersonator Gaumeda, while 9 rebel leaders stand before him, hands bound and ropes around their necks. It was propaganda of the highest order, and also, it turns out, one of the most important documents in the history of human knowledge. The Behistun inscription is to cuneiform what the Rosetta Stone is to Egyptian hieroglyphs, the document most crucial in deciphering a previously lost script. Written in Old Persian, Elamite, and Akkadian, it was only fully deciphered in the 19th century, when the British officer Henry Rawlinson dangled from ropes on that same cliff face to copy its characters by hand. With the revolts crushed, Darius turned to the real work of empire, and here is where the title the Great begins to earn itself in full. He completed the organization of the empire into satrapies, a system begun by Cyrus the Great, and fixed the annual tribute due from each province. The empire was divided into 20 provinces, each governed by a satrap, a kind of viceroy, who managed taxes, military affairs, and civil order. But Darius was too shrewd to simply trust the satraps. He introduced a system of royal inspectors, known to the Greeks as the eyes and ears of the king, who traveled the empire, reported on corruption, and kept the provincial governors honest. Coinage, weights, and measures were standardized, and land and sea routes were developed. The most famous of those routes was the Royal Road, which stretched more than 1,500 miles from Ephesus on the Aegean Sea to Susa in western Iran, the empire's administrative center. Along this road, Darius built a relay system for royal messengers that anticipated, by more than 2,000 years, the modern postal service. Herodotus famously described these couriers. Neither snow, nor rain, nor heat, nor darkness of night could prevent them from completing their appointed rounds with all speed. Those words would later be inscribed, much later, on a post office in New York City. Both taxation and trade were facilitated by coins Darius issued, depicting himself as a warrior, with uniform values that were easily exchanged, a practice he adopted from Lydian and Greek rulers. These coins, called darics, circulated across the known world. An expedition led by Scylax of Carianda sailed down the Indus River and explored the sea route from its mouth to Egypt, and a canal from the Nile River to the Red Sea. Probably begun by the Egyptian ruler Necho I in the 7th century, was repaired and completed. With that canal, a ship could now sail from Babylonia all the way around the Arabian Peninsula to the Nile Delta without setting foot on land. And then there was Persepolis. Starting around 515 BCE, Darius's workers leveled the ground and created a terrace of 450 by 300 meters, on which stood the treasury and the great audience hall, known as the Apadana. The Apadana could accommodate hundreds of people at the same time. Its 72 columns were 25 meters high. Artisans were summoned from every corner of the empire, from Egypt, Babylon, Ionia, and the Far East, each bringing the craft traditions of their homelands. The result was a palace unlike anything the world had seen, a building that was not simply Persian, but that expressed in stone and gold the entire diversity of the civilization Darius had built. The reliefs on the stairway depicted the king, his court, and delegates from every corner of his empire bringing gifts, an image of a harmonious, culturally diverse kingdom ruled by a benevolent king. In religion, Darius showed the same pragmatic style. Under his rule, Zoroastrianism became the state religion, providing a cohesive sense of identity across his far-flung empire. Yet Darius did not impose the belief system on those of other faiths. His subjects in conquered lands could continue to worship their own gods and keep their own cultural traditions. In 519 BCE, he authorized the Jews to rebuild the temple at Jerusalem, in accordance with the earlier decree of Cyrus. He built a temple to the god Ammon in Egypt, endowed the temple at Edfu, and empowered the Egyptians to re-establish the medical school of the Temple of Sais. In Egypt, he was remembered not as a foreign conqueror, but as one of the great lawgivers and benefactors of the country. Darius consolidated and expanded the Persian Empire through humane, wise, and judicious administration. He respected the languages, religions, and cultures of his subject nations, and in return they fought his battles, built lavish palaces for him, and brought him precious gifts. By the time the 6th century gave way to the 5th, Darius ruled an empire that stretched from the Indus River in the east to Libya in the west, from the steppes of Central Asia in the north to the cataracts of the Nile in the south. It included much of West Asia, parts of the Balkans, the Caucasus, most of the Black Sea's coastal regions, Central Asia, the Indus Valley, and portions of North Africa, including Egypt, eastern Libya, and coastal Sudan. Nothing like it had ever existed. And then, his eyes turned west, toward a world that would prove far more costly than he ever imagined. The Scythian campaign of 513 BCE was the pivot point. In 513, after subduing eastern Thrace and the Gedi, Darius crossed the Danube River into European Scythia. But the Scythian nomads devastated the country as they retreated from him, and he was forced, for lack of supplies, to abandon the campaign. It was not a defeat in battle, but it was something almost as damaging, a campaign that ended in frustration, with an army that had marched vast distances to vanquish an enemy that simply refused to stand and fight. The Scythians did not need to win. They just needed to not lose. The satraps of Asia Minor completed the subjugation of Thrace and secured the submission of Macedonia, and the approaches to Greece were now in Persian hands, along with control of the Black Sea grain trade, of major importance to the Greek economy. And yet, it was not the Scythians who would break Darius. It was the Ionians. The Greek cities along the coast of Asia Minor, Miletus, Ephesus, Halicarnassus, and dozens more, had fallen under Persian control when Cyrus conquered the kingdom of Lydia back in the 540s BC. For decades, they chafed under Persian rule. The Ionian revolt had begun with an unsuccessful expedition against Naxos, a joint venture between the Persian satrap Artaphernes and the Milesian tyrant Aristagoras. In the aftermath, Artaphernes decided to remove Aristagoras from power, but before he could do so, Aristagoras abdicated, declared Miletus a democracy, and appealed to the states of mainland Greece for support. Most turned him away, but not Athens. In 499 BCE, Ionian Greeks revolted against Persia, and Athens moved to support them. The Athenians sent ships and soldiers to aid the rebels and beat back the empire. Together, Athenian and Ionian forces marched on Sardis, the great Persian administrative capital in Western Asia Minor, and burned it to the ground. Darius was told that Sardis had been captured and burnt by the Ionians and the Athenians. He asked for a bow, took an arrow, and shot it up into the sky. As it sped upward, he said, "Zeus, grant I may punish the Athenians." He then ordered one of his servants to repeat to him at dinner each day, 3 times, "Master, remember the Athenians." A Persian victory at the naval battle of Lade in 494 BCE crushed the Ionian rebellion. The city of Miletus, which had been the center of the revolt, was destroyed and its population deported to the Persian Gulf. The rebellion was over. But Darius's rage was not. In 492 BCE, Darius dispatched an expedition to Greece under the command of his son, in-law Mardonius. Mardonius re-subjugated Thrace and made Macedonia fully subordinate to the Persians. But not long after, his fleet was wrecked by a violent storm off the coast of Mount Athos, which brought a premature end to the campaign. Darius sent heralds across Greece demanding earth and water, the traditional Persian symbols of submission. Athens and Sparta both killed the Persian messengers who came to them. It was an act of extraordinary defiance, and, depending on your perspective, either magnificent courage or suicidal provocation. The Athenians had taken part in the destruction of Sardis, the capital of the Persian satrapy in Western Asia Minor, in 498 BCE. Though the revolt had been crushed, the Athenians had not been made to pay the price of their interference. This was an intolerable situation for Darius. In 490 BCE, he acted. He sent a naval task force under Datis and Artaphernes across the Aegean Sea to subjugate the Cyclades and then make punitive attacks on Athens and Eretria. Reaching the island of Euboea in midsummer after a successful campaign in the Aegean, the Persians proceeded to besiege and capture Eretria. The city was destroyed and its people enslaved, the first part of Darius's punishment delivered. Then the fleet sailed south, rounding the Cape of Euboea, and landed at the Bay of Marathon, northeast of Athens, on a flat coastal plain that seemed perfect for cavalry. Accompanying the Persians was a man who knew Athens intimately. Hippias, the former tyrant of the city, who had been exiled decades before and had since found refuge at the Persian court. He told them where to land. He dreamed of being reinstated as a Persian puppet. The Persian navy carried tens of thousands of infantry and cavalry to Marathon to punish the Greeks for supporting the Ionians. The Athenian army, outnumbered by at least 2-1, marched out from the city to meet them. They sent the runner Phidippides to Sparta, begging for reinforcements. But the Spartans said they were engaged in a religious festival and could not come. Athens, and the small contingent from Plataea that joined them, would face the Persian Empire alone. The Athenian army of approximately 9,000 hoplites, supplemented by 1,000 troops from Plataea, faced a Persian army that outnumbered them by at least 2-1. Under the leadership of the general Miltiades, the Athenians employed a strategic formation that weakened their center while strengthening their flanks. When the moment came, they ran toward the Persian line, closing the distance fast enough to reduce their exposure to the Persian archers. The two strengthened wings crashed into the Persian flanks and folded them inward. More than 6,000 Persians were killed compared to fewer than 200 Greeks. The survivors fled to their ships. The greatest empire the world had ever seen had been stopped cold by a city of fewer than 30,000 free men. According to legend, Phidippides then ran from Marathon to Athens, roughly 26 miles, to announce the Greek victory, only to collapse dead after his arrival. That run, whether historically true or not, would echo across 2.5 millennia. It became, in 1896, the basis for the modern Olympic marathon, a race born of a battle that Darius the Great never wished to become famous. He never got a second chance. Darius made definite plans for another invasion, but before he could launch it, a revolt broke out in Egypt. Then, as he was organizing both the suppression of Egypt and the new expedition against Greece, Darius died in 486 BCE. He had ruled for 36 years, fought across 3 continents, built one of the most sophisticated administrative systems in human history, and raised some of the most extraordinary architecture the ancient world would ever see. And he died with Athens unfinished. The struggle against Greece was carried forward with vigor, but in vain by his successor, Xerxes I. Xerxes would bring 1,000,000 men, or so the ancient sources claimed, and for a moment would seem to have succeeded where his father failed. He burned Athens to the ground in 480 BC, but at Salamis, and again at Plataea the following year, the Greeks broke the Persian tide definitively. The empire survived, but the dream of a Persian Greece died with it. So what do we make of Darius the Great? The title the Great has been awarded selectively across history, to Alexander, to Cyrus, to Charlemagne, and it always implies a certain completeness, a rounding off of ambition into achievement. Darius built more, organized more, and administered better than almost any ruler before him. His roads, his coinage, his postal system, his irrigation networks, all of these raised the standard of living across the Near East and left institutions that would outlast his dynasty by centuries. Some of his legal traditions, remarkably, form part of the basis for Iranian law even today. The Behistun inscription he carved into a mountain became, 2.5 millennia later, the key that unlocked the entire world of ancient Near Eastern languages. And yet, the Great sits a little uneasily, because the story of Darius is also a cautionary tale about the nature of power and its limits. An empire that stretched from Sudan to the Indus, built with extraordinary intelligence and genuine tolerance, was ultimately bent out of shape by the desire to punish one small city that had meddled in a revolt he could have absorbed. The Ionian revolt had directly threatened the integrity of the Persian Empire, and the states of mainland Greece remained a potential menace. Darius resolved to subjugate and pacify Greece. In a logic of empire, that decision was rational. In the judgment of history, it was the beginning of the end. Because what Marathon really produced was not just a Greek victory. It was a Greek identity. The soldiers who fought there, the outnumbered men who ran toward the arrows, became the affirmation of a civilization. The Athens that defeated Darius at Marathon went on, in the following decades, to build the Parthenon, to produce Sophocles and Euripides, Socrates and Plato, Thucydides and Herodotus. Without the Battle of Marathon, or rather, without Darius's decision that Athens needed to be punished, the trajectory of Western civilization might have looked very different. Darius was great, but greatness is not the same as invincibility. And the man who had 19 battles carved into a cliff to celebrate his power over the ancient world was, in the end, remembered by that same world most vividly for the battle he lost in a bay on the coast of a small peninsula he never fully understood. That perhaps is the sharpest edge of his particular greatness, that even his defeats changed history. And that is a kind of immortality that no inscription, however high on a cliff, could ever fully capture. Thanks for watching. See you next time with another human story.